North Bay's Union Cemetery, the final resting place for some of North Bay's pioneers. Like Dr. Carruthers, who was one of the first pioneer doctors in North Bay, and a public school was named after him in his honor for being part of the public school board. As you walk up the hill, passing by those who call North Bay their eternal home, you will notice a large monument perched there, and a small cobblestone wall bordering it. That marks the final resting place of North Bay's leading pioneer, John Ferguson.
So the late John Ferguson is legendary in North Bay. Everyone from the city recognizes him as the founding father. His surname lives on in the street, Ferguson Street, that divides several east-west arteries. So it's considered that Ferguson Street is a dividing line between east and west of the city. So he was actually born in Callander, Scotland. He was, by the age of 4, brought to the northern part of Ontario in the county of Renfrew, so just on the way to Ottawa. That's where he was a little boy, and he grew up there. He went to school there, and when he reached working age, he went to Bissett Creek, which is just actually slightly east of Mattawa. So he also worked in De which is also just outside of Mattawa, and he eventually made his way to Mattawa. Mattawa was actually a pretty bustling town back in those days. This is where his fate really began to unfold in Mattawa. So John Thompson, who was a storekeeper for the CPR in Mattawa, he needed a volunteer to take mail to the CPR workmen who were expanding the CPR line to what is present day North Bay. And Ferguson, who was only 18 at the time, volunteered to do that. Of course, it was a major thing back then. So he had to take a horse and buggy over very rough terrain to get to North Bay. Anyway, Duncan Mcintyre, and you recognize the Mcintyre name, Mcintyre Street. He was John Ferguson's uncle, and he was the vice president of the CPR at the time. And he encouraged John to apply to the Crown Lands Department for a parcel of land in that area known as North Bay now. And he was granted 288 acres, which is pretty fair bit of property. So most of the downtown for $288, $1 an acre. So he built with some friends this long log home, and he actually became North Bay's first postmaster. And back in those days, the postmaster was arguably one of the most important people in town. So Jeannie Ferguson was the matriarch of the family. Anyway, she basically came to North Bay very close to the same time as John Ferguson. So John Ferguson came around 1882, and he and Jeannie got married in 1884, and she came from a very well-known family as well. So her main name was Jeannie Fraser McFarlane. By the way, her family was one of the first to settle in North Bay. So it's not exactly that John was the only, early arriver here. Jeannie was too. John and Jeannie had actually built a small house. It was a log house in North Bay in the downtown area. They had the first shingled roof. There were no shingled roofs before that. And then sometime later, their fortunes kind of increased. They got more money. They built this house on what is now McIntyre Street West, and it was actually finished with plaster made from the lime from the Manitou Islands. So Jeannie, being the lady, of course, of the house, she had a lot to do with most everything to do with the home itself. So that became a very prominent and well-known home in the community. And when different regiments like the Algonquin Regiment or other regiments, military regiments, wanted to get their photos taken, they'd often go to the Ferguson home. And you can imagine that it wasn't John Ferguson that was outside getting everything ready and making sure that invitations were sent out for parties and this type of thing. It was Jeannie. So she ran the household and she raised the kids, like John was busy working out of the house. That's what men did back then. So, so when people talk about John Ferguson, really, they're doing a disservice to his wife, because she was there supporting his endeavors, and not only supporting his endeavors, but also creating a beautiful home and family life for the family, So, and it took me many years to find her name. Like, it was always just Mrs. Ferguson or Mrs. John Ferguson back in those days. A couple of years ago, I came across a card, like a Christmas card she had sent, and her name was on there, Jeannie Fraser Ferguson. She actually raised two sons. So they, John and Jeannie had two sons, Duncan and William. Before he became mayor, he served as councillor, and so he served for 18 years as councillor, and he served 4 consecutive years as mayor from 1919 to 1922. And he was also president of the North Bay Board of Trade, which is now known as the North Bay and District Chamber of Commerce. So some people on my Facebook page, A Bit of the Bay, some people recall the Ferguson home. One lady, Louise Cheevers, said she remembers it looking so formal and elegant when she was younger. And Larry Cosgrove, another fellow, remembers delivering newspapers to the home. And Judy Elliston, who's the chairperson of Heritage North Bay, actually, she remembers walking by the home, and when the items inside were being auctioned off, because both Jeannie and John had passed away. I forget the date Jeannie passed away, but John was 46 and Jeannie was after that. So they auctioned off a bunch of stuff. So Lord knows where a lot of that ended up. And people wonder what happened to the home. It was actually offered in John Ferguson's will. It was offered to the city, and it's very unclear how it ended. It ended up in Merle Dickerson's hands, and he had it torn down and built the Ascot Hotel. So that now is, I believe, it's called the Days Inn.
John Ferguson passed away in 1946. A year after the war ended, while Jeannie passed away in 1958.